With voter communication and voter attitudes, what we're seeing in Alaska is primarily an electorate that is, in a lot of ways, more engaged than ever. We have in Alaska, we have an electorate that's growing younger, and in 2016, the Alaska Center worked with a number of other groups to pass automatic voter registration via a ballot initiative. So we have a automatic voter registration that's tied with our permanent fund dividend, so our check that Alaskans receive every year because of the sovereign wealth fund that we have because of oil development. Most every Alaskan, as you can imagine, who's a full-time resident gets a PFD. And so that means most every Alaskan who's eligible to vote is also registered to vote. Since 2016, 2017, we've seen over 50,000 new people on the rolls. And now the challenge remains in ensuring that those people get out and vote as well. But one number that I like to look at as a measurement is that in 2014, we had $60 million spent on a competitive Senate race in Alaska and higher turnout than ever for a midterm election. In 2018, we had another midterm election, and despite lower percentage turnout, we had roughly the same number of overall voters. So what I see is an electorate that is getting more engaged over time, despite the extreme systemic barriers that remain that prevent groups all across the board from engaging with the process. And I think the biggest barriers there tend to be with attitudes, like you mentioned, and with confidence in our election system. In some of the research that we've done on our new voters, those 50,000 voters, when we ask what the barriers are that have prevented folks from either registering in the past or voting in the past if they were previously registered, the answers we get back are surprisingly mundane. And I don't think that will be a surprise to anyone on this call, but it's rarely that somebody, it's less frequent that someone lacks transportation or has a major reason why they can't get to the poll. It's much more frequent that people have competing priorities. They have kids at home, or they have multiple jobs, or they have places, other obligations on election day, and it can be really challenging to get to the polls. And so the reasons that we hear back range from anywhere from, we have a sense that it's like, oh, apathy, but it's really less frequently it's apathy, and more frequently it's just too many things on their plate, and this one isn't elevated high enough. So for me, I see voter confidence and voter turnout as uniquely as distinctly tied to voter security and election security in general, because in my opinion, the more Alaskans and the more Americans that we have engaged in our political system, the more confidence that people have as well. And so I think it's critical that as our electorate continues to grow, continues to shift, that we are able to communicate with folks about these challenges and about the disinformation tactics, so that folks have just as much confidence voting from home or voting in person or voting early or in whichever way they feel safest. I was glad to hear Chairman Clary speak to some of the issues around, getting out the word across the state of Alaska and how difficult and how expensive it can be to reach people all across the state. I think with that in mind, and with Senate Bill 241 that Scott mentioned passed earlier this year, that would have allowed for universal vote at home, universal vote by mail for all Alaskans, according to the legislature, the Lieutenant Governor didn't implement that law, and so we didn't see ballots mailed to every Alaskan. We didn't even see ballot request forms mailed to every Alaskan, right? And there's ongoing litigation around this. But we, at the Alaska Center, we work with a coalition of groups that are committed to ballot accessibility. And there's 5 demands that we made of the state earlier this year, and we'd still like to see each of them implemented. The first is to send a ballot or a ballot request form to every Alaskan. The second is 3 full weeks of early voting. I consider us pretty lucky in Alaska to have 2 full weeks of early voting, but we could do more. We could go for a third. The third is a drop box in every single community across the state. The fourth is guaranteeing mail delivery of every ballot mailed across the state, with or without postage. the state can do this. The USPS typically does this, but the state can do it by covering that cost. And we'd love to see them do that and also abolish the witness requirement this year, because it's too hard for people during COVID to necessarily be able to get a witness on every single ballot. And the fifth is to distribute the translations of Alaska Native language election materials that they're already doing into 7 dialects of Alaska Native languages all across the state to the precincts and in the locations and digitally to the communities that need them, and not just in the precincts that they're required to by the most recent court case that required those translations. So I just wanted to add those because I know that we're focused on cybersecurity and election security far into the future, and not just here during the pandemic. And I really look to states like Massachusetts that voted this last week and really showed that it is possible to do a mass mail ballots to as many eligible voters as possible, and have a really engaged electorate that helped make that election a success. So we do still have 2 months. Today's the 3rd. The election's on November 3rd, of course, 2 months from now. And really implore the division elections. I want to applaud them for all their work to make elections so accessible this year. But want to continue to support them in making sure that everyone who is able can have their voice heard this year.